In the summer of 2009, LEGO Star Wars released this little number, and surprising many people, in 2023, they released this, the UCS Venator. So I'm comparing what at the time was a $120 Venator to what is now a UCS $650 Venator. I can't believe it's real. Now you're looking at 1,170 pieces for the playset versus 5,374 pieces for the UCS set, a massive difference. And when it comes to the pricing I just mentioned, the 2009 Venator, of course, isn't still $120. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $170 in today's money. But if you actually wanted to buy a sealed in box 2009 Venator, it would cost you just as much as buying the UCS Venator. So consider this comparison more for fun than actually making a purchasing decision. As this isn't a typical comparison, we won't be keeping score, but let me know which Venator is your favorite in the comments below after watching the video. I want to start with the packaging and unboxing differences between these two sets. In 2009, we actually had really cool looking box art, and somewhat unfortunately, LEGO has changed to all black art for the adult LEGO Star Wars sets, which is like pretty sharp and cool looking, but you definitely miss out on what could have been some cool box art. I think here we have Christophsis, and here it would have been neat to see Coruscant, but we don't get that. We just get the all black art. I think all the other sides of the UCS box, though, are way cooler, showing off different shots of the UCS Venator, except when we get to the back where it's a little bit more even ground there. They both look pretty cool from behind. Now, unboxing the 2009 playset was a really standard experience. However, the 2023 UCS set includes additional boxes on the inside with extra art. In this case, it's Revenge of the Sith Venator art, which really doesn't fit the Clone Wars theme of the rest of the set, but hey, it looks really cool. And then unlike the 2009 set, the instructions were protected from being bent. My 2009 ones came pretty bent, which was unfortunate, but outside of the write-up and the design process behind the Venator and the UCS instructions, they're otherwise the same old LEGO instructions you would get in any other set, just substantially longer. Now, when it comes to the minifigures, you actually get more for less in 2009, receiving 5 in total versus only 2 for the UCS set, but that is normal. When big LEGO Star Wars sets don't have a particular area for minifigs to integrate into the build, they usually just stick a couple on the stand as part of the set to help sell it and to include some higher quality minifigures. Now, I don't feel like I'm getting the highest quality minifigures for $650 with Admiral Yularen and certainly Captain Rex, but for $120, the Chancellor Palpatine, the 2 clone commandos, the clone pilot, and the clone gunner were all excellent Clone Wars themed figures. And another interesting difference between the two figure selections is that despite them both definitely being based on the animated Clone Wars series, the newer figures are decidedly less accurate. LEGO has gone with a more realistic style for the characters, again, despite them being based on the animated show. The easy difference to point out is the eyes on the characters. The 2009 figures have pretty large eyes, but they are accurate to what we see in the show versus the new just single white pupil eye design on the newer figures. It looks good, but it's not quite accurate to the source material. Clone armor is also a discrepancy here, where while Captain Rex does have nice arm printing and the addition of foot and leg printing that we didn't have before, the actual armor design, it's a mixture of live action and animated armor when it shouldn't be. These are just little things, but in a $650 UCS set, you would think you'd be getting that, and you don't. So I lean towards 2009 being the better figure selection with that really cool Palpatine, the Senate Commandos, and a couple other clone troopers. Now finally, with both Venator builds in the same room, I want to start with the swooshability. Picking up each Venator model is distinct. The playset has a handle built right into the top, but as you start to move it around, a lot of things like to rattle on this one, which can spook you a little bit, but it is built strong enough to like withstand good swooshing. You don't really have to worry about things falling out and falling off, but there's definitely a lot of rattle. Now the UCS set is a silent machine. I'll lift this up and it hardly makes a noise as I swoosh it around. It's also at a time like this that you should remember, just because you can swoosh the UCS Venator doesn't mean you should. What I'm doing here is a really bad idea for something that could take you 12 hours to build. Moral of the story is both builds are sturdy enough to be picked up and moved as needed, just in the appropriate ways. Externally looking at the front end of each build, and we're obviously comparing a UCS set to a playset, the playset looks worse. The UCS set just integrates way more detail than you possibly could on the relatively tiny $120 set. It also has a much nicer rounded feel to the front end of the Venator. It might be slight, but it's definitely noticeable in comparison to the flat edge. The side of the UCS Venator has really nice greebling and even integrates a slight bit of translucent blue in there to add some of the light that you would see on the side of the Venator. It looks amazing versus the playset model, which just has some exposed Technic holes. It's ugly. The big turret on the side definitely looks way better on the UCS one, but it falls off super easily versus the playset, which actually allows you to move it up and down with ease, and it never falls off because it's actually built really well. So there's a bit of a trade-off there for the look on the UCS one. Now, the top front of the UCS one is obviously far more detailed. You can see a lot of depth built into it versus the playset, which literally just has some studs with a little bit of dark gray integrated into an otherwise light gray design. Now, the true difference here is that the red line on the UCS one is completely different than the red line on the playset one. The playset one has just one continuous red line with no breaks or steps in the design, and it ends just squared off at the top. This one actually has the accurate kind of triangle ending at the top, but also has a break in the design as the red line is going up the Venator. It actually cuts in and then continues on, which is accurate to the way that this one is supposed to be versus this design is accurate to the way that it is supposed to be. I think except for the top end should be shaped more like that, but it isn't. The Republic logo placement on both these sets is different, as the playset has it before the red line ends and the UCS set has it after the red line ends. Both are accurate depending on which model of Venator you're trying to depict. They used a clear sticker on the playset ones so you actually see the plastic color underneath it versus the UCS one where you can see there is a difference in color between the sticker color and the actual plastic, which makes it look a little worse. Now, for all intents and purposes, there's no interior on the UCS version. I still don't get it, but it's gotten a lot of criticism for not having that, but it's not something that I'm going to criticize it for. I don't think it needs it. And at the end of the day, it seems like it's just not there because of all the structure needed within the Venator. Anyway, if you really want to know, this whole red line at the front technically can be lifted off and you can see like what you're left with after the model is built. There's just no space to work with there. There was never going to be an interior on this set. But if interior is what you want, maybe the 2009 model is for you. We have Palpatine's desk and chair plus some empty space that has another sticker there that does have the clear base, so the sticker color doesn't really distract compared to the actual plastic color. And then at the front, there's a crate that actually has printed LEGO Death Star plans. But this is what the space looks like outfitted with minifigures, and it is pretty cool, but obviously the downside of this is that they had to make this midsection of the Venator substantially taller than it really should be, making the Venator overall look a bit wonky because they screwed with the proportions. And you can see this when you put it side by side with the UCS Venator, just how much sleeker it is in that front section compared to this Playscale one. It's no comparison there. The Playscale one looks way worse, but obviously you get that gained functionality. Now, I think one of the ugliest parts of this Venator is this seam where you go from the front section of the Venator to the back section of the Venator, and you have this just massive gap here that looks pretty ugly. And I think it's really underappreciated what they were able to do on the UCS version, where it's nearly seamless. You don't even think about it, but you can see the studs coming in at a completely different direction all throughout the front of the UCS Venator, and then obviously throughout the back are at like a regular straight on angle. So it's amazing to see the two sections come together so nicely versus how horrid it looks on the Playscale from 2009. Obviously techniques and everything have improved, but it doesn't mean it don't look bad on the old one. Now, I talked about the functionality of the handle earlier in the video, but it's also supposed to be the front angled part heading into like the bridge of the Venator. Obviously, that's something that looks amazing on the UCS model, but surprisingly for a Playscale model that has it being used also for a handle, it looks half decent, and they keep it at the proper angle alongside the plates on the side of the build. Again, the UCS one just stomps it here, especially because it integrates so much very cool light blue. But this isn't the worst. You just only get a little bit of light blue at the top of the bridge, which you can see done even better on the UCS one. I think this is an interesting area as you compare the scale and size of these two models. The size of the actual bridge is surprisingly similar between these two compared to the size of everything else. And I do like the gray of the 2009 Venator bridge. The red actually indicates that it is a flagship Venator, if you didn't know, but I do like the color on the older one a little bit better, even though the design is certainly wicked on the new one. Now, for the turbo laser turrets on the Playscale Venator, they are built as play features and can spin all the way around, but they also look half decent, and they, I think, tried to make it look like they were recessed into the panel slightly by adding a raised part in between them, but on the UCS one, they are actually recessed into the panel, and they look way better. They just lose any of that play functionality. But it is kind of neat to me that despite being so much smaller, the Playscale model still incorporates the proper number of 4 on each side. Now, the back section of the UCS Venator overall just looks really good with some nice angling and greebling. On one side it has a closed off door, and on the other side it has a microscale Republic gunship leaving out. The playscale model looks like this on both sides, completely closed off without a ton of detail and tons of extra space on the ground for some reason. But that's because, unlike the UCS Venator, where the panels aren't really going to open up and do anything, this one actually has a play function or two baked in. The first one is kind of a surprising feature on a Venator, but it's actually a bomb dropping function. There's a very large container that's completely removable that you can fill with up to 5 included bombs. You have a piece that sticks out on one side, and when you spin it, the bombs feed down through gravity and drop out of the bottom of the Venator. It's pretty dope to see in action and works really well. I think the only downside to me is that you have to completely pull this section out whenever you want to reload it. Now behind that you have a very large cannon built in, and it's actually on a slider, so you can move it to either side of the Venator as you please. It does have a seat there, so you can set a clone trooper on it and he can man it and fire at enemy ships. There are a couple of flickfire missiles on the top, but they're pretty hard to get at. Looking at the back of the UCS model versus the back engine area of the playscale model, there's a couple play features baked into that we'll touch on in a second, but the overall engine design is just phenomenal on the UCS one. Like I said in my review, it's so great, and the engine sag is pretty minimal compared to what you might expect given how extended these are off the main body of the ship. You're not going to see any real engine sag on the playset Venator either, but the engines on that UCS model are just second to none. Some of the best back-end design on any LEGO Star Wars set ever, perhaps, other than the sticker right here, which nicely blocks up the color and continues that dark gray stripe back, but the lighter gray part below doesn't look so good. If they had just done the dark gray part on the top, maybe it just looks way better, but having that discoloration on the sticker does not help versus the playscale model, which just uses bricks, so you just don't end up with that type of issue. Also kind of underappreciated, you have this bottom support part on the UCS one that's properly represented, and it kind of is on the playscale one, but it's just way smaller, but it's kind of there. Play features here are going to be the cockpit, which you can just completely pull out and place your pilot in if you'd like. It might be one of the weirder seating arrangements in a LEGO Star Wars set like this, but it does have a pretty cool sticker with the Venator on there for the control panel. It's a weird shape, but it definitely connects in nicely with the design once you place it in. Even though it's a play feature, you really can't even tell that it's there. You can't even tell that your clone trooper's there unless you pull that forward. It doesn't take away from the design at all. It looks really nice. And then if you pull this back panel down, there's actually an escape pod packed in, which is kind of surprising, like just another play feature on this Venator. And unfortunately, we've run out of minifigures. We haven't been keeping count. We've used all 5, so a 6th minifig in this set would have been nice to go inside of here. I mean, you can take any of the minifigs and place them in here, but overall, a nice escape pod. The last section of the Venator to discuss is the underside, which on the playscale one, you can see the part where the bombs would come out, but is really bland. It doesn't have any extra color, no extra detail. It really does absolutely nothing. But on the UCS model, they added a ton more detail, so you can see just how much better that looks compared to this playscale model. Not that the bottom of the model is particularly important with how good it looks. Like on this playscale model, I'm never looking at the bottom of it other than right now. But on the UCS one, just to have it there and know that it's there and it looks beautiful, even if you have to really peek underneath to be able to see it, is still really cool to know. I think if you want a LEGO Star Wars Venator in 2023, the choice is clear. You should get the poly bag. Just kidding, the UCS one is the obvious buy at $650. I think it's a fair value outside of the Captain Rex. I think everything about it is really awesome. I do think the playscale one is cool for nostalgia purposes, but if you're gonna end up paying the same price, why wouldn't you just get the UCS one? It's way better for $650 than buying a sealed one of those for $650. Anyway, I hope you found this side-by-side of the Venator insightful. If you did, please leave a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and you can check out more LEGO Star Wars content on the end screen now.